It's all driving me crazy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 16th Annual Scissortail Creative Writing Festival. This is day 2 and session 3, and I am Steve Benton, and Ken has given me the honor of presenting our next speaker today, our next reader. I am a professor of English at East Central University, and I am the director of the honors program. And our next reader is the poet Tiffany Midge. She is an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. She is of Hunkpapa Sioux and German ancestry, and she grew up in the Pacific Northwest where she lives now. Her most recent published book came out in 2019. It is Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's. It's a collection of life, politics, and identity as a Native woman in today's America. And it is available, there it is, looking good. And it's available at Bison Books or for order at Book People in Moscow, Idaho. So please go get your book. You'll want to after you hear Tiffany read today, I'm sure. Some of her other books include Guiding the Stars to Their Campfire, Driving the Salmon to Their Beds, a full-length poetry collection, Outlaws, Renegades, and Saints, Diary of a Mixed-Up Half-Breed, which was the winner of the Diane Decora Memorial Poetry Award. Her 2016 collection, The Woman Who Married a Bear, from University of New Mexico Press, there it is, also looking very good, which was the winner of the Kenyon Review Earthworks Prize for Indigenous Poetry. And she also, nice, it's kind of a Vanna White vibe we've got going there. You're doing well, Tiffany. She also has a children's book called Animal Lore and Legend, Buffalo. It was put out by Scholastic Press. Her work has appeared in numerous journals, including North American Review, World Literature Today, The Raven Chronicles, Florida Review, South Dakota Review, Shenandoah, Poetry Northwest, the online journals No Tell Motel and Drunken Boat. And she earned her MFA from the University of Idaho. And she's going to read today for about 30 to 40 minutes, and I'm going to make my face disappear. And then I'll come back at the end to talk to you guys about the next Scissortail session, which will be happening later tonight at 6 o'clock. So everybody sit back, put on your seatbelts, and get ready for the ride. We're so happy to have you with us, Tiffany. And now's my disappearing act.
Alrighty. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's actually like very reassuring having you there. Maybe you can come back at some point. That would be good. Otherwise, it's just me. All right. Yes. Put your trays in their upright position while we take off here. Thank you so much to these lovely people having me here today for Scissortail. And I'm very, very pleased to be part of the program. Thanks again for having me. I thought that I would start this program, my part today, by just dipping into some poetry, reading some recent poetry, and then going and doing some pieces from a woman who married. This is Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's. So to start off, let me begin with kind of a dark poem here. This one's called The Foolish Girls. Two very foolish and lazy girls seduced an old white star and a young red star. They went to live with their new lovers in the star world. Anta Playton's story. Sister claimed the young star, choke cherry red. When a baby, she swallowed a moth and since wanted wings. I took the white, who wheezed when I rode him, coughed out stories from his chest, unfathomable worlds strung like pretty beads, all compelling yet confused. My blood's a charm, consumed by salt and the sweetest fat. Our hearts dish out their darkest jams. Seasons past, I wondered, what hungers did we avoid from the lands below? Here, sister wears a rag, her beauty eclipsed by her glittering lover. Here, the stars keep white bones stashed in a pile. While the stars sleep, the bones rattle and teethe. That was a persona poem. And in this volume of poetry, The Woman Who Married a Bear, I took some like Plains native legends and kind of took liberty with them and rewrote them from the persona point of view, as if I just storied them essentially. And another favorite of that from that section was The Woman Who Married a Bear, about a woman who married a bear. And one of my favorites from that was Teeth in the Wrong Places. And that's also based on, it's a Ponca story. And there's an epigram that goes, Coyote was ripe for adventure and wanted to visit the evil old woman that he'd been warned about. She lived with her 2 wicked daughters, and those who had slept with the handsome girls were never seen again. Sister, Coyote's just like any man, hungry for the dark loaves of a woman's thighs. You peel the skin of the tongue, they complain it's burnt, add Tabasco. You boil the last of the turnips, they whine, goes down like gallstones. Beauty's just a bite away from want. I've seen fox chew off his own limb for one more taste of freedom. Mothers set trap lines near beavers' dens, hauled in more than she could skin. They moved farther upriver next spring. What west wind blew those men into our house? Who ransacked the curio shelf, the burlap quilt and button jar? Whose boots are these tracking swamp rot through the kitchen? Where's yesterday's bread? And which dolt didn't cover the butter? Tomorrow, I'm fixing to kill the angel of this house. Those men that come through here, shooting lead slugs through my green bottles, waterlogging a season of straw, taking liberties with my good hen. Remember that one, those moons back, stepped out the beats like a jackrabbit and ornery as a circle saw. That other, eyes a sweet blue, but disposition salty as piss and vinegar in the noonday sun. I say, Coyote same as any man. Sister, desires fixed to cut a tooth. Sister, I'm set to start grinding. If he's still here come morning, lay out the linen and splash on the toilet water. Put the beans on to soak and bring up the choke cherries. Lend your voice to some pretty hymn. Occupy his ears so he's not to hear that clackety-clack racket, that awful gnashing of teeth going on down there. Should he ask, say how bitter an autumn we've had. Wouldn't he like to keep you warm? Then fasten your eye to his fly, give his nether regions a good scratch. Fall open to the place where the moon rides up, north of the trap line in a thicket of hairy frost. Sister, desires fixed to cut a tooth. Sister, it's set to start grinding. A recent poem that was published on the, I think it's one of those poetry, big poetry things online. It was distracted from COVID-19. Attention shifts to MIA Maiden from Land O'Lakes Butterbox. And I had the distinct pleasure of having Billy Collins pick this out and read it on his poetry podcast. So that was a thrill. So let me just bring it up. Okay. America mourns for the Indian figure who knelt like a supplicant before dairy, fatly blessed our milks, our cheeses, anointed our lands and shores. The Google tutorial surface, the boob trick, score the box and fold to make a window for her knees to jut through. Oh, our butter maiden brought all the boys to the yard. Hang on just a second. Okay. Twitter's fear so prostrate with grief, petitions are launched for the dairy princess. Oh, our Pat, Americana. Oh, our dab, oh, Disney-esque. Oh, our dollop, oh, heritage. The morning procession bears witness. Jolly Green Giant and Chicken of the Sea Mermaid, Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, Magically Delicious Leprechaun and Peter Pan, even the Argo cornstarch maiden and Mazola margarine. You call it corn, we call it maize. Spokes Indian, raise stalks in solidarity. Mia, aptly named, our butter girl mascot, the only Indian woman gone missing that anyone notices, anyone cares about. I'm going to dive into Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese. And the opening piece, the title piece is the opening of the book. After the distinguished scholar Gary Hobson's introduction. It was very good to write this introduction. And it gives like this wonderful layout of all the types of comedic humor that's been in literature in the very, very early days among Native literature. So it's a really wonderful introduction. He was very, very kind to write that. And then the rest of the book starts with the chapter 1, which is called My Origin Story, is a cross between Call Me Ishmael, a few too many whiskey sours packed in an old thermos at the drive-in double feature, and that little voice that says, you got this. And then the opening is Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's. The day of my mother's funeral service, I separated myself from the rest of the grieving throng and hid out in the musician's belfry like tortured Quasimodo, my grief too hideous to expose. I peered down at the mourners below, watched my aunts struggling with folding a star quilt, trying to contain it within the casket. The lid wouldn't close. The white pastor believed my mother's quilt was some sort of ancient Lakota ritual. He announced it with gravity and a sense of suspicious distance. Native flute music floated out from the speakers as my aunties struggled to close the lid, both furtively cramming the ends of the quilt into the casket, tucking my mother inside. One of them gestured exasperatingly to the other, and then they both started to laugh. Months before her death, my mother made me promise that we'd bury her in her royal blue pantsuit, her favorite color. She forced her jewelry on me. Here, take this. Here, take this. It is both touching and morbid to accept a dying woman's most personal belongings, her favorite silver and turquoise earrings, the onyx bracelet, the Black Hills gold ring. She even gave me her little silver buffalo pendant. I wore it to a grade school presentation, and one of the children raised her hand and asked, "Is that a pig?" The crucial difference between having children versus having pets is that when your sister's cat gets run over by a car, you can say things like, "She never was very bright." Wakes lasted for days, my mother says. We'd get bored waiting around while the old people sat huddled over like crows. Sometimes we'd tell the younger kids that the host needed to use the outhouse for extra storage until it was time for the deceased to be buried. We'd tell the kids that it was a multiple fatality car accident, lots of parts that needed storing. Those kids refused to use the outhouse after that. On the day that my mother received her test results, we stopped off at a restaurant for lunch. The waitress complimented my mother on her earrings, and my mother laughed. "Do you want them? I won't be needing them." Grandma Iron Thunder's service was held on a scorching day in the middle of August on the Dakota Plains. There was gold-colored grass and blinding sky for miles in every direction. Her casket was draped with the red quilt featuring the famous silhouette, the end of the trail, stitched in black cloth. My mother clucked. "I hate that quilt. Good thing they're burying it." Following the fire and brimstone of my mother's memorial service, I wended my way down the spiral staircase from the musician's belfry, and a church lady I'd never met before congratulated me on my beautiful singing. "You have such a beautiful voice," she cooed. I thanked her, taking all the credit, even though I had not been singing at all. On November 22nd, 1963, at the doctor's office, my mother and her husband received news that he had 6 months to live. Immediately following the short walk to the car, Frank switched on the radio, and they listened briefly to the story about the assassination of President Kennedy. Then they switched off the radio and started driving back home to spend time with their new baby daughter. My Grandma Wing's funeral was held in an old church and cemetery at Fort Peck. She requested everyone wear white. She was 98. The service was dignified and affecting, replete with a mix of traditional and Christian songs. As the funeral was finishing up and people were paying their respects, a melee erupted outside. A dozen or more cousins jumped Rachel's baby daddy and beat him to a pulp. All those white shirts and all those white pants stained with blood and dirt. Someone said, "Clyde's last stand." The men all laughed. When my mother's respirator was finally removed and we watched the monitors slowly wind down, and when I finally left the hospital, a 3-year-old girl refused to let me pass until I acknowledged her ecstatic declaration, "We just had a baby." The Lakota unburdened themselves of hair, of fingers cut into their flesh to temporarily escape the grief of a loved one's death. I saw this on A Man Called Horse and in Dances with Wolves. But as far as I knew, no one in my immediate family had ever done this. My mother was worth far more than a hank of hair. She was worth my spine, my eyes, my womb. There are many versions of the scenes that take place inside my head. A dying mother instructs her daughter with their last wishes. But the one I remember the most is poached from a meme making the rounds online. I want my remains to be spread at Disneyland, my mother says. But I don't want to be cremated. Just leave my parts. Okay, I promise. You can bury my heart at Chuck E. Cheese's. Okay, you got it. Bury my heart at SeaWorld. I will, Mama. I will fight no more about putting the toothpaste cap on forever. We were two Indian women laughing until our bellies ached, spitting death right in the eye. And my next piece is called Headlines. Headlines, like newspaper headlines. And I was playing around with the idea of all these various different headlines and how they can interact with experiences in my own life and stories from that I've heard from others through relatives and whatnot. And it was an interesting exercise to play with. Headlines. I've been saving newspaper clippings, curious human interest stories to inspire my writing efforts. A cache of yellowed newsprint lies in a small pile. Women charged with death of overfed toddler. Man marries 29 times, will have funeral. Mermaid girl to have legs split. One clipping is particularly compelling. Mother's coma ends after 16 years. The woman resurrected from her coma is Standing Rock Sue. She emerged from her 16 years sleep on Christmas Eve, and her nickname is Happy, which makes me think of the Seven Dwarfs, which makes me think of another Disney icon, Sleeping Beauty, a more apt attribution. My headlines collection today is harvested mostly from Facebook news feeds. The day my pastor claimed gay people are possessed by fart demons that can drive pigs to suicide. Charles Manson's wedding canceled, bride just wanted his corpse to make money. Idaho lawmaker wonders if women could have gyno exam by swallowing little camera. Years ago, I watched a TV movie starring Elizabeth Montgomery from Bewitched. The movie was about a woman who reemerged after being in a coma for over a decade. Her readjustment from having been a popular high school cheerleader to being poised on the edge of middle age met with harrowing challenges. A handsome high school basketball coach fell in love with her and aggressively pursued her, trying to break down the barriers of her teenage shyness, which culminated in the literal breaking down of her door, yelling, "Love me!" She finally submitted. These days, there'd be a 12-step program for what the basketball coach was afflicted with, not to mention a restraining order. Pastor claims women are penis homes and men's penises belong to God. My Aunt Carlotta suffered a brain aneurysm and never woke up. She'd always been active and in good health. She and her husband had just adopted a little boy. She sent us pictures. And then, abruptly, silence. For nearly 2 decades, she slept, wasted away, slept, growing thinner and thinner, sleeping and sleeping in a convalescent home outside Glasgow, Montana. Her husband remarried. Her little boy grew up and married. Relatives passed away. Presidents served out their terms, were reelected, served out those terms. More headlines. The Berlin Wall fell. The United Nations declared war on the Middle East. Waco. O.J. Simpson. Oklahoma City terrorism. Cloned sheep. First Black president. My aunt slept and slept. Headline: Practical help for the demon-possessed. Vatican rolls out new exorcism course. Some thought my aunt was the victim of Indian witchery, a jealous enemy perhaps, an imagined trespass or a real trespass. I don't know whether I believe in these things. I don't know if I even believe in ghosts. Believing might only allow such things to surface. Once I wished out loud for a woman to be dead, and the next year she died, her body blooming with tumors. She was my boyfriend's old lover, a kindled old flame, and was a catalyst for the breakup of his marriage, a wedge in his relationships that followed. Like with me, I was not the only woman in his life who seethed with jealousy. Headline: Woman in sumo wrestler suit assaults ex-girlfriend in gay pub after she waved at man dressed as Snickers bar. My father had dated Aunt Carlotta before he met and married my mother. Carlotta was my mother's sister-in-law. It was less than a year after my mother's husband died that my mother married my father, my sister-in-law's ex-lover. I wish I knew why my dad and Carlotta broke up. I don't know if there was any animosity between my mother and Carlotta. They always seemed to be good friends, but you never know. It's easy to become confused about these things. Headline: Students cook and serve grandparents. My mother's best friend in Havre, Montana, Twyla, was stricken with a troubled marriage. Maybe stricken is the wrong word. It wasn't like getting a flu. But then again, maybe a troubled marriage is like getting the flu. If I can wish someone dead, certainly someone else could catch a bad marriage. That marital virus that's going around. Maybe even a hex. Twyla's husband stalked her whenever she went out. He thought she was running around on him. Mason stowed away in the trunk of her Riviera, and she caught him when she put groceries in the trunk. On another night, my mother dropped by to visit, and as she was getting out of her car to walk up to the house, she discovered Mason perched 12 feet high in the branches of a tree, spying on his wife. Headline: Man with nothing to declare has 55 tortoises in his pants. The Lakota word for horse is Shinka Wakan. Wakan, which translates to sacred or mystery, and Shunka, meaning dog. The Sioux are a horse culture, and the horse is highly revered, a spiritual being. This makes my childhood allergies to horsehair particularly ironic. It would have been hard for me if I lived in olden times. I was also allergic to rabbit fur as a child. This seems less of a problem since, as far as I know, rabbits aren't especially revered, not like horses anyway. I suppose my father didn't take this into account, the fact that my mother was Lakota and raised on a reservation in eastern Montana, when he brought home what looked like a gift and presented it to my mother. It was a package wrapped in brown butcher paper and tied off with white string. All I remember were that words were exchanged, voices raised, some alarm, and then my mother rushed from the kitchen in tears. My father calmly pulled out a fry pan, unwrapping the meat from its brown paper and cooking it like it was any other. Headline: PETA suggests Washington Redskins keep controversial name change logo to potato. I learned of death's paradoxes when I was 6, how acts of violence are sometimes demonstrations of mercy, even love. Along a Pacific beach, he found a wounded mallard and applied an axe to end its suffering. From flight to prey to a naturalist specimen, the mallard submitted to an inexact science, one of air and wind, one of pressure and temperature, one of sand and ocean salt. Among the viscera and ruins, my father indicated the transparent bubble. This is how it floats. A fretwork of shadow and light. The blood mirrored the pretentious readings of clouds, a swirl of lines and curves from where the song begins. Headline: Emotional support pig. Headline: Emotional support pig kicked off flight for being disruptive. The last time that I ever saw Jeff alive, he gave me a gift, an hourglass. And it took over 2 decades later for the symbolism to finally dawn on me. An hourglass, gifted from a young man with 1 foot planted in the next world. His time was running out. Even the hourglass he gifted me appeared to have been stolen, I imagine from the desk of one of the school classrooms he was hired to clean. Not borrowed time, but stolen. Headline: Old man, 98, wins lottery, dies next day. Headline: Agoraphobic grandma finally leaves home, immediately falls down manhole. When were these photos taken? I asked my mother. We are removing items from her dresser drawers, taking inventory to prepare for the day she will die. She has lung cancer. I hold up the black and white photos for her to see. I have never seen them before. There are 3 pictures, all taken in the same location, some isolated forest road. She looks gorgeous, disheveled, dreamy. They are from an earlier era, the 70s, taken when I was still very small, when I lived with both of my parents, my sister, and my grandfather. The photos were taken by her lover, a man my mother admits was a close friend of our family. I barely remember him. She hid the pictures away for years. Headline: The eagle has landed. 2 men walk on the moon. Headline: Chronicles of an affair with his secretary found in an abandoned suitcase. Headline: Lana Turner's daughter fatally stabs her mother's lover. And the next chapter in my book is called Instead of Raised by Wolves t-shirt, mine reads Raised by Functional Alcoholics with Intimacy Phobias and Low Self-Esteem. Hang on. There's a really long essay in that one about this guy that I knew named Jimmy. And then there's this really, my name is Moonbabe McSwine. And then there's a very long piece about live theater, about the Siam sequences. I'm going to go ahead and read a shorter piece from the chapter. Gosh darn it, you say patriarchy, I say malarkey. Dollars to donuts, cuckoo banana pants, you gals and your lady power this and that. That's in my feminism chapter. Just a second, I do want to take a drink of water. Bear with me. Okay. And so I wrote these pieces for McSweeney's magazine, and they were open letters. And they poked fun at, I don't know, I guess they poked fun at mainstream culture and media and the things that we're doing and watching right now, which, you know, I also am very much a part of that bandwagon, let me tell you. This one was called An Open Letter to White Girls Regarding Pumpkin Spice and Cultural Appropriation. Dear Kennedy, Madison, Scout, Brittany, Cassidy, Cheyenne, et al. Not to sound like I'm singling anyone out here, but as an Indigenous woman, I feel a scoosh bit territorial, to put it mildly, about the commercial appropriation of pumpkin spice and how each year seems worse than the last. I don't mean to exaggerate, but the soon-to-come pumpkin spice season virtually impales me with dread as I wait for the pumpkin spice hysteria to lay siege upon my otherwise placid pumpkin spice-free life. I don't intend to pumpkin spice shame anyone, but I'm talking to you, Piper, Lisbeth, and Clementine. Pumpkins and their kinfolk squash have a very specific meaning to Indigenous people. Squash is among the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and are specific to several Eastern tribes. I hope you will keep that firmly in mind when you order up your next pumpkin spice latte, Mackenzie, or light your candelabra of pumpkin spice scented candles nestled among those inevitable gourds so tastefully arranged on your autumnal table, Aspen. I hope that when you feel that irresistible urge to impulse buy those pumpkin spice Oreos, or that pumpkin spice Special K, or that pumpkin spice scented Listerine or feminine hygiene products, Matilda, that you'll stop and take a moment to think about the origins of that pumpkin spice Purina cat food you're so casually placing on the checkout counter. I hope that you'll pause and reflect upon your irresistible urge for pumpkin spice Cheerios, Hortense. Let me start that sentence again. I hope that you'll pause and reflect upon how your irresistible urge for pumpkin spice Cheerios, Hortense, is part and parcel of the same irresistible urge that brought your ancestors to our shores. The same irresistible urge your ancestors had when they slashed and burned, slayed and pillaged their way across North America in the name of their one true Lord. And while I don't agree that pumpkin spice scratch and sniff liner paper for your cupboards is a particularly wise or dignified choice for your new apartment, Peyton, I can still appreciate a handful of pumpkin spice Skittles just like the next gal. And I can even appreciate the novelty of pumpkin spice ranch dressing, Vanderbilt. I'm not a complete Philistine. I personally have never had a pumpkin spice latte. And even if you handed one to me, Ariel, and even if I was very cold or very thirsty, Lexus, I doubt that I would drink it. I am troubled by the colonial undercurrents of pumpkin spice, Finnegan, and in an effort to create awareness of pumpkin spice cultural appropriation and to help implement safe space environments, Delaney, there needs to be, at minimum, pumpkin spice free zones at all coffee shops and restaurants, and preferably assorted autumnal drinks for women of color. Maybe chai or jalapeno chocolate chai. I feel that it's important to decolonize the pumpkin Portia and place limits on the settlers' mentality's love affair with all things pumpkin spice. Yours truly, Tiffany. Which is about the whitest name you could ever imagine. So, yeah. So the next chapter is kind of my activism chapter. And I titled that one, Me Cutting in Front of All of the People in All of the Lines Forever. It's okay. I literally was here first. Decolonized AF. And the piece that I'm going to read from my activism section is called Attack of the 50-Foot Lakota Woman. In September 2016, a 50-foot monument bearing the likeness of an unnamed Lakota woman, replete with blowing in the wind star blanket shawl, was installed upon the banks of the Missouri River in Chamberlain, North Dakota. Her creator titled the giantess sculpture Dignity. At the time of Dignity's launch, if you followed the Missouri River to the north, another launch took place. Concussion grenades, water cannons, rubber bullets, dog attacks. A launch of incalculable greed and disregard for life. The No Dapple demonstration and standoff was an event on the scale that the world had never seen, and it sparked universal awareness and attention towards the most critically urgent issue of our time, protecting the water. Mini Wachoni, water is life. The Dakota Access Pipeline Project is expected to cover 1,172 miles and to connect the Bakken and the Three Forks production areas in North Dakota to Patoka, Illinois. The pipeline will enable domestically produced light sweet crude oil to reach major refinery markets. Now, the pipeline cuts straight through ancestral lands sacred to the Standing Rock Nation and threatens its main water supply, the Missouri River, Minnesota. Ladonna Bravebird Allard, Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Preservation Officer, owns the northernmost land of the Standing Rock Reservation. The northern border is the Cannonball River. The eastern border is the Missouri River. From her land, you can see the pipeline corridor. The land that she grew up in tells the history of this river back 2,000 years. When I think of the Dignity sculpture and the militarization and standoffs of the small, otherwise peaceful communities on Standing Rock, where my own mother and grandparents were born, and specifically when I think of monsters in regards to the Black Snake prophecy, I can't help but think of the 1958 creature feature Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. In the movie, a rich socialite encounters an alien life form and is transformed into a giantess, a 50-foot she-beast. The King Kong-sized woman goes on a rampage after discovering her husband in a bar with a no-good floozy. 8 industrial-sized hooks, 4 lengths of chain, 40 gallons of plasma, an elephant syringe, and an electrical fire later, she's finally subdued. The authorities responsible for successfully capturing and bringing her down holler things like, "I can't shoot a lady. What do you want me to do, salt her tail?" In my reveries, the Dignity sculpture breaks from her foundation, secures the blue star quilt firmly around her shoulders, and follows the Missouri River north to Cannonball, up to the Oceti-Sakowin 7 Council's fire, straight into the heart of things, and gets to work killing the Black Snake. In my reveries, the authorities do not succeed in bringing her down. 8 industrial-sized hooks, 4 lengths of chain, 40 gallons of plasma, an elephant syringe, and an electrical fire. In my daydreams, she is not defeated, but victorious, and freeze-framed eternally, despite concussion grenades, dog attacks, water cannons, and rubber bullets. The land that she grew up on, tells the history of this river back 2,000 years. What stories of this river will be told in 2,000 more? I devoted an entire chapter to a phenomena that's well known in Indian country, and that is of faux natives or faux Indians or pretendians, or I like to call them DIY Indians. And And the title of that chapter is called Shill the Pretendian, Unfave the Genuine. It's the 2018 remix of Kill the Indian, Save the Man. And I have an essay in here about Rachel Dolezal. And then I have a piece that's sort of in the tradition of Jeff Foxworthy, So You Might Be a Redneck. And I'll just share that one. It's called You Might Be a Pretendian. It seems like everyone and their great-grandmother wants to be Indian. This is nothing new. There's a name for folks who give off these mixed smoke signals, pretendians. From Iron Eyes Cody, Shania Twain, Justin Bieber, and Ward Churchill to Elizabeth Warren and Andrea Smith. Those are just a few. And let's not forget the over 18 million questionable self-proclaimed Cherokee tribes. Move over Rachel Dolezal. Pretendian culture is a national pastime with a long celebrated history right up there with baseballs, hot dogs, and apple pie. It isn't just for breakfast anymore. Chances are, if you're a pretendian, you're not aware that you're a pretendian. That's just part of the pretendian pathology. Remember Rachel from the sci-fi movie Blade Runner? Rachel didn't know that she was a replicant. She believed that she was human. She was programmed to think she was human. The only thing convincing her otherwise was the irresistible Harrison Ford making her an offer she couldn't refuse. Currently, there is no pretendian equivalent to Blade Runner's Voight-Kampff test, the test used to identify replicant from human. And there is no official native version of the old TV game show To Tell the Truth, called Will the Real Native Please Stand Up? Though there totally should be, in my humble opinion. So until that time comes, I've created a checklist that should help identify anyone who might be ethnically confused. Are you a pretendian? You might be a pretendian if you write high cheekbones as proof of tribal citizenship when applying for a job. You might be a pretendian if stands with a fist is your personal role model. You might be a pretendian if both of your parents immigrated from Germany. You might be a pretendian if you're in need of a dream catcher intervention. You might be a pretendian if you belong to a tribe that collects dues or is a registered nonprofit. You might be a pretendian if your grandmother never even met your supposed Indian ancestor. You might be a pretendian if you carry war paint in your purse. You might be a pretendian if you think blood quantum is measured in electron volts. You might be a pretendian if you got a wolf as a pet. You might be a pretendian if you wear your regalia to the gym to work out in. You might be a pretendian if you feel entitled and expect Native people to sublet their intellectual property to you without a deposit. You might be a pretendian if you think immersing yourself in a rich cultural experience means bathing in a bathtub full of yogurt. You might be a pretendian if you think Idle No More is a 12-step anger support group. You might be a pretendian if you think you are better at being Native than any other Native person in history. You might be a pretendian if you cried during the movie Avatar. You might be a pretendian if you've had a tanning bed membership since 1992 and buy self-tanning lotion by the case. You might be a pretendian if you find your car at the mall's parking lot by following your trail of turquoise and abalone. You might be pretendian if you think sleeping with a Native person makes you Native by proximity. Stay tuned, or you might be a super Indian if. I think we're getting there. It's about 10 to the hour now, so I probably should just stop reading right now, since I feel like I'm reading from a hymnal. But anyway, yeah, so bury my heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, wherever fine books are sold. Thank you.
Okay, I hit speaker view.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
I wish, I mean, I know it was a great honor for you to have Billy Collins read some of your work, but for us, the greatest pleasure is hearing you read your own poetry. And I wish you could have been in this room to see our smiles and to hear our laughter. And I hope that one day we'll all share that pleasure.
Yes.
It was wonderful
Absolutely.
to spend this time with you on a Friday afternoon.
For Easter.
I want to say thanks to the Oklahoma Arts Council for helping to support this event, the Daryl Fisher Lecture Series and the ECU Foundation. Thanks to Ken Hayda for organizing this, Mike Maxwell for handling all the technology, all the colleagues in the English department and the ECU administration who helped make this possible. And I want to remind everybody that one of the advantages to holding Scissortail like this is that we can rewatch and you can share this reading with the people you care about the most. If you go to youtube.com/Tiger Media, you can replay today's reading. And please remember that if you want more of Tiffany's writing, you can go to Bison Books or at the Book People in Moscow, Idaho to order your copies. And we have another Scissortail Session 4 coming up tonight at 6. Quraysh Ali Lansana will be reading then. That gives you just enough time to go get something to eat and then settle in for another ride. And Tiffany, I hope that you do get down here in the future for one of our festivals. And until that day, I'm going to be looking for a jalapeno chocolate chai that I can offer you when you get down here.
This sounds great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So have a great afternoon, and we'll see many of you back here tonight at 6.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.